The BBC and Disney Plus released the latest Doctor Who special, The Star Beast, starring the 14th Doctor, David Tennant, who returned to the series. And the show has gotten a lot of pushback for its push on transgender ideology and the inclusion of a man playing a woman in the show. And so we're here to talk about that with a special guest, Father Christopher Miller, who is a longtime Doctor Who fan. He also has a YouTube channel called The Nerd Father, where he talks all things pop culture. So let's welcome him in here to the Trent Report.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. I know you had actually kind of been anticipating this new Doctor Who special.
With
David Tennant was
dread.
returning. With dread, a little bit, because we kind of knew a little bit with what Russell T Davies had said was going to happen, and obviously leading into Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor and kind of the things that he'd been saying. But I guess there was a little bit optimism. David Tennant was coming back. People were kind of were hopeful that there might be something good here with these specials before we got to the Ncuti Gatwa stuff. But you watched this. What did you think of the episode?
Where to begin? It's like what Gary basically described, Gary from Nerdrotic. It's basically a trans allegory because everything revolved around Rose or whoever, Jason, who Rose, I just dead named, I guess. But I tried watching it before.
Jason, in the show.
I tried watching it again before we went live, and I couldn't get through it. I mean, David Tennant probably is my favorite new Doctor. So, I mean, I grew up with classic Who. Tom Baker's the great one. I even have his autographed photo in my room here. He would be my favorite all-time Doctor. Tennant was my second. And I loved Tennant's original run. But Doctor Who's been so damaged over the last 5-6 years. And even towards the end of before Jodie's run with Peter Capaldi. Capaldi was a diehard Doctor Who fan, and they just gave him such horrible scripts. And I mean, a lot of the political stuff we've seen over the last few years with Doctor Who even came in towards the end of the Matt Smith era, I think.
So how would you describe this compared to a lot of that stuff you'd seen previously? Was this kind of the same, or was it just way over the top?
It's good to see David Tennant, but this was basically in your face. The thing, if you know anything about Doctor Who, one of his enemies is the Master, and it was always a guy. But then I don't remember what season it was, they turned the Master into a woman, and Master became Misty. And it wasn't bored to your face, wasn't really focused on that it had changed genders. I mean, it actually worked. But then when Capaldi regenerated, they focused on the first female Doctor and everything, and it just, if they hadn't made the hoopla about being a female, it might have worked.
So I watched a little bit of this episode. The first 10 minutes, they repeatedly tell you over and over again that this man is actually a woman. They do it through multiple different ways. At one point, you have the mom, Donna Noble, describing her son as a woman, as her daughter.
It's a beautiful daughter.
Yeah, beautiful daughter. And then you get to this taxi cab driver who actually turns out to be the dad, Donna Noble's husband. I believe his name is Sean Temple. And he's describing that he has two beautiful missuses in his life, obviously referring to his son and his wife. And they keep doing this over and over and over again. There's even kind of a veiled threat from Donna Noble's character. They get back to their flat or their house, and she tells her son, basically, hey, if anyone does anything to you, I'm gonna bring down the planet.
Well, and that's the thing. Them. I mean, even one of the articles said that the kids were dead naming her, to kind of mock her. And you probably didn't even see the part. So you said you tuned out.
I did see this part. They ride by on bicycles and yell, "Jason, Jason, Jason."
But did you see the part where the Meep turns evil?
No, I did not. I didn't get to that
because part, they even make the Meep into a transphobe, because talking about the stupid woman and then her weird daughter, and that's what they used. The term was weird daughter.
So even the alien can actually recognize the truth, at least.
I
So
think
that's
so.
interesting.
But I mean, Doctor Who has always been kind of political. I mean, even when Moffat was around the first time, I think it's season two, they had two women that were basically married. I mean, Torchwood, which was the darker version spin-off from Doctor Who, was totally off the
Right.
walls because
Yes.
I mean, Captain Jack would hit anything that breathes and moves. And I mean, and that was kind of the fun thing about him. And they even kind of make fun of it in the Five Doctor reboot or whatever it was around the 50th anniversary, because it turns out that John Barrowman is actually secretly married to a woman and has three kids.
Hmm.
So I mean, it wasn't in your face. I think that's the thing I'm trying to say is
Right,
the
beforehand.
stuff back
And
then
now
was
it's
not in your face. Everything now is just in your face.
yeah, I mean, I watched again, probably watched the first 15 minutes, and in that first 15 minutes, there was like they were just hammering it that this man is actually a woman, and they wanted to try and convince you that this man was indeed a woman when
Mhm.
anyone can clearly tell that it's not a woman, it's a man. One of the things too that the episode had was um, there was this kind of like lecture that the doctor gets, and I thought this was like probably the most insidious part of the entire episode that I saw, is where they're actually confronting the Meep and the Tennant's doctor describes him like just kind of off the cuff as like as him, which is typical standard normal English. At least it was before
Yeah.
5 years ago when like insanity took over. And so there's nothing wrong. And then you have Jason describing like kind of correcting him is like, did you just assume his pronouns? And then Tennant immediately apologizes. Immediately, like doesn't even say like, well, no, this is like, yeah, of course, this is just typical English or something like that, giving like a retort on that, but immediately capitulates, buys into kind of this ideology of these pronouns that they're trying to push, and then says, "Oh, well, what is your pronoun? Are you a he, she, or they?" And then the Meep says, I describe myself as the definite article or whatever. I
The
am the Meep,
collective. Yeah.
and I just was kind of I thought that was just so gross and disgusting and insidious because they're trying to teach you how to behave through the doctor because the doctor is obviously the main character, the protagonist, the one that you kind of you're following his journey on. And so if he's doing it, oh, you should be doing that too. And I found that kind of just
See, and
repulsive.
the thing that hurts for me is, and was trying to remember, I think it's season four when Donna Nova was the companion, um, because her mother was in the original one too, in the original series. And now it just makes her look like she's trying to dance on eggshells, trying not to offend the
Yes.
son or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, Jason. Yeah, I noticed that too because I did see a little bit of that as well, and
Hmm.
it just made it was just really awkward and it just I don't know. I didn't it kind of it takes you out of the immersion that you're supposed to have within the show. For me, the Doctor Who is just a little too quirky just in general for me. It's hard for me to like really get invested into it because it just feels so I don't know what's the right word. It's
Well, you
like
should have grew up with it like I did. So I probably mentioned I grew up in Iowa, and every Friday night was sci-fi night on PBS. So it would be like, and I wasn't into it at the time. Red Dwarf was on, but they would have the entire episode of Doctor Who from like the 60s and the 70s up until McCoy. And that's how I got introduced to it. I mean, it was not these, because when it originally aired, it was like one of seven episodes or something, half-hour episodes. But PBS back then would run the whole thing. So one of my favorite stories is from John Petrie's era. Third Doctor is Inferno, which is kind of like a parallel dimension story, kind of like a mock time, or no, not mock time. The Star Trek episode where Kirk is evil or no, Spock's evil and everything. The opposite of the world. But I mean,
like mirror universe stuff.
yeah, mirror universe. I mean, the effects were cheesy. I mean, you could tell it was done cheap, but it was good. And
Yeah,
when it came back in 2005, they had the money, they had the budget, they had better effects, better music, better stories, and it was wonderful. and then just kind of went downhill again.
Yeah, I feel like there's not the idea that the budget can really affect things with the effects. I think we can still immerse ourselves into a story if it's a really good story, even if you have lower budgets. I think we have something like Five Nights at Freddy's can kind of prove that. We had a $10 million budget for the Halloween reboot, made 80 million its first weekend back when that came out, like what 2018. So I don't think that. I think there's actually a desire for some of that more like real. It's real, like you can tell that it's real because we've just been kind of overloaded with a lot of the CGI stuff. And so I definitely think that's interesting to me. What I'm talking about more is just kind of like even in this episode here that I watched, especially in the beginning, he arrives out of his the TARDIS, he goes into the street, she drops her boxes. He helps pick her up, but then he just like all of a sudden like runs over to the taxi cab. I just thought that was just kind of weird to me. It's like, why is he just all of a sudden like running over here? And even that had like the joke that was pushing the transgender ideology there, where he's like, oh look, I'm the master of information or whatever his title was, and the guy's
Yeah,
like, oh
mistress.
no, it's mistress, and it's like it's just like what, like you just roll your eyes and you're just
Well,
like
it's
this
it you
beating
know,
over the head with it.
in a way it could kind of excuse it because I mean, he had just regenerated, so I don't know, things are still converting, I guess. So the psychic paper, if you know what that is, hasn't converted yet to understanding that he's now a he again.
Okay. But I don't know. That just seemed like something that they put in there because of the ideology that they wanted to push in there,
But
especially with
the one
everything
that
else.
really is even more painful, I don't know if you saw the Christmas or the Kids in Need story, the one before the Star Beast, where they go back to the creation of the Daleks. He's like, I was just 60 minutes ago a brilliant woman, and now I
Yeah.
have this old face back.
So he's like regretting that he like regenerated
I
or something.
I don't know. Well, I mean, the thing is, this is the first time a Time Lord has ever regenerated into a previous face, but that was kind of foreshadowed in the 50th anniversary with Tom Baker returning as the curator,
Right.
revisiting familiar faces from time to time. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they tie it back to that. I doubt it.
So I want to ask you, watching this episode, you're a huge Doctor Who fan. Do you recommend it to people to watch?
I'm almost at the point where I'm hate watching it now. I mean, I wanted it to be good. I'm going to give the new Doctor a try, but my patience is very limited because it's just like Star Wars. My whole childhood has been spat upon, and the things I grew up with have been destroyed, distorted. I the fact that the guy is a trans whatever, okay, I'm not going to say don't watch it because of that, but it's just not good. I mean, the thing is, if you took out the political ideology and everything, it was a decent story. I mean,
With
I
the
would
meep and
probably
the
with the
people
Meep,
hunting the meep
the
and then the
storyline,
twist.
yeah, the storyline about the Meep was fine. I mean, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. But then when you put in the political stuff, I'd probably drag it down to 3. I would say, I'm going to watch the next 2 episodes. I don't think I'll ever watch it again after that.
Right.
So I
So
mean,
one of the things that
it's hard to say if you want to watch it, okay, but just prepare for garbage.
there you go. One of the things that I've kind of said, I feel like Disney has a moral duty not to kind of show this stuff because it is pushing this ideology. We know that they're trying to push this onto children, and it causes kind of not only moral harm to them, but there's also emotional and mental harm that can be inflicted on them too by watching a lot of this stuff. Do you think that is something that Disney should be calculating when they're deciding to air this on Disney Plus or even going to BBC with the fact that they're actually producing stuff like that? Do you think that is something that they need to be taking into account and whether or not they should even be making stuff like this?
It's not going to
Because they
stop
have,
them.
I know, but I understand it's not going to stop them, but is that something that
It'd
like
be
if we
nice.
were living with with like people like, should people actually be making this stuff or is this something that
20
we
years,
should?
25, 30 years ago, they probably would have. because remember when Disney branched out to Buena Vista, I believe it was, so that they could start making R-rated movies and everything. But now it has the Disney logo. But the thing is, ever since the South Park episode came out, everything, I think it's being mocked. I think we're starting to see a change in how this stuff is being mocked. I mean, put a chick in it, make it lame and gay.
Right.
So I
Do
mean,
you think that's
I'm hoping it might be a change. I don't know.
you think that's the right approach? Is kind of just basically take the
To
South Park
mock it?
approach, completely just mock it and make it into
Yeah,
like
that's
an
pretty much
absolute
what
butt of
I'm
the joke,
doing.
and that's kind of how you destroy the ideology that they're trying to present as something that is legitimate.
Well, I mean, you look on the social media, see how many times they say put chicken in it, make it lame and gay when something bombs.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
it
Wish is
turns
a
out
good
to be true too.
example.
And it turns out to be true, right?
Yeah,
It's usually what they're doing.
yeah.
In this case, they put a man in it and made made it lame and made it lame and trans, right? So I guess you could kind of take that meme and do it that way. So final thoughts on this. Like, what is your predictions for the future of Doctor Who? I guess we saw the ratings for this one overnight were like 5 million. It was still like 2 million below the premiere of Jodie Whittaker's 13th Doctor. Do you see the ratings continuing to go up, or is it just people are going to outright reject
No.
it and it's just going to slow decline, or are we going to see a steep, like massive fall off after this special?
See, if you remember during the Matt Smith, David Tennant era, you go into Barnes and Noble, they had a whole Doctor Who section of toys, magazines, gadgets, and stuff. I remember 10, 15 years ago, my kids that I taught were excited about Doctor Who. I had a kid that dressed up as the Matt Smith Doctor Who with the fez and the bow tie. Um, I had two girls that loved Doctor Who when I had them in eighth grade. I saw them a few years ago as seniors, and I asked what they thought of Jodie. They hated it. They've lost a lot of the fans. I mean, it's like Animaniacs when it just came back after being off the air for 20 years. They brought the original cast back. They have the voice talents. It just wasn't as good. I mean, it's nice to see David Tennant on the screen again. He still has the feeling of the Doctor, but it's just not as good as it was 20 years ago.
Why do you think it's not as good? Do you think it's just like what do you think?
Times has changed, unfortunately. I mean, it just again, you just look at the last few seasons of the Doctor, even before Jodie Whitt, whatever her name is. I mean, Capaldi's last season, I didn't even finish because at that time they had Bill, who was a lesbian and who reminded you almost every 30 seconds that she's a lesbian.
All right.
So I don't
All right.
see
Well,
it going back to that before.
all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us and giving your thoughts on Doctor Who. We really appreciate your insight, and it's really sad that they've turned longtime fans like yourself away from the show. But we're seeing this across these media empires, especially with the Walt Disney Company. Obviously, you mentioned Star Wars. We're seeing that now with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I do like your advice on how to deal with a lot of this stuff. Now it's kind of just take the South Park route and absolutely skewer it with mockery. So we appreciate you joining us, and
Yeah, thank
hopefully
you.
have you back sometime soon.
Sounds good. Good to see you.
See you too.